to yield 3 minutes to one of our lead co-sponsors on this legislation, Ms. Sinema of Arizona.
Gentlelady from Arizona is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman Fitzpatrick and Ranking Member Lynch. Over the course of the past year, the Task Force to Investigate Terrorism Financing has found that U.S. government efforts to counter the financing of terrorism lack sufficient coordination, and that the United States has no unified national strategy to guide our counter-financing efforts. The federal government must change its approach and mindset to counter the financing of terrorism. And this is why Chairman Fitzpatrick and I introduced this bipartisan legislation to direct the Secretary of the Treasury, in coordination with relevant federal agencies, to establish a whole-of-government strategy to combat the financing of terrorism and related forms of illicit finance. This strategy must include a critical assessment of the effectiveness of U.S. efforts to fight terrorist financing, ways to improve coordination with international, state, and local law enforcement and the private sector, and a comprehensive discussion of threats, goals, objectives, and priorities for disrupting and preventing terrorist financing. The strategy should enhance detection, deterrence, and prosecution, and ultimately strengthen our broader national security goals. Our legislation forces the federal government to create a whole-of-government strategy to counter terrorism financing that improves the effectiveness of our efforts and better aligns these efforts with our broader national interests. Terrorism is an undeniable threat to our country's security and global stability. Terrorist networks constantly develop new ways to finance their deadly operations and threaten America. The Islamic State is one of the world's most violent, dangerous, and well-financed terrorist groups. To keep our country safe, we must be one step ahead of ISIS, cutting off its funding and stopping its efforts. Thank you, Chairman Fitzpatrick and Congresswoman Velasquez, for allowing me to join you and work with you on this important legislation. Thank you, Chairman Henserling and Ranking Member Waters, for establishing this important task force. And thank you, Chairman Fitzpatrick and Ranking Member Lynch, for your leadership on the task force to investigate terrorism financing. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to keep money out of terrorist hands and build on our progress to strengthen America's security. I yield back.
Gentlelady from